Nick Grimshaw, unfamiliar to a studio like this. How are you feeling?
Very alien. No, I love being in a studio like this. Your voice is really compressed in your head nicely, isn't it?
It is. We might have lost one or two listeners already, Nick. Pulsating radio chat. But have you been away from microphones for a couple of years now? Is it a couple of years?
No, a year. Just over a year. Left like last summer, like August 2021. And and now I'm back talking about my book in radio stations. I went into Radio 2 the other day. It's a BBC station, don't know if you've heard of it. And I went on, and that was the first time that made me think, oh God, I do love radio. And I'd not really missed it for about a year. And then I went on and it was actually really fun.
Your book has a fascinating opening chapter because it basically, it sets out your nervousness about writing it, your fear that you would never manage to write it. I wonder what the reaction was when you sent that in to your publisher.
They didn't love it at first. No. Well, do you know what? I have a terrible attention span, and I had this sort of momentous task to do of sitting and writing a book. And when I sat down to do it, some days it just sort of flew out of me and it was really great. And I was like, great. And then they were like, okay, now we just need like 65,000 more words. And I was like, oh, for God's sake. And then sometimes you just couldn't do it. And you'd sit and like weeks had passed. And I was like, I was going mad thinking like, I can't do it. I've got nothing to say. I can't write at all. I can't do it. And then one night at like 9:30, I was like, do you know what? Just to get writing, let me write exactly how I feel right now. And how I felt at that moment was, I hate this book and it's doing my head in and everyone's going to hate it and it's going to be rubbish.
Do buy Nick's book.
It's a great sell. It's a great opener. But I thought, let me just write that just to like get it off my chest. And then actually it sort of cleared some sort of blockage and I wasn't going to use it at all. And then I was like, maybe that is funny for the introduction, because I wanted it to be honest, and it felt honest. Like I didn't sit down and be like, I'm an author, let's just do this. Like it was hard to sit and to think about what I wanted to say, and hard to reflect on life and think about, who am I? What do I want to say? So I thought, let's be honest and stick that actually at the front.
In a way, as a radio presenter, you protect yourself from all of that, don't you? Because you can choose when the microphone goes on exactly how much of yourself you want to put out there. And often the joy of it is that you can put a shinier, happier, nicer version of yourself on air. So when you sat down to write the book, did you deliberately have to make that gear change? Did you have a sense of how much you were going to tell people?
Not really. No. When I started, I just wanted it to feel like me talking to a friend. I didn't want to have like an author's voice. I didn't want to I wanted it to sound conversational. And as I said, terrible attention span. I wanted it to feel like, I love that feeling on a Saturday or Sunday when you get the supplements and you can sort of flick through and like read all different things. Like that's my optimum weekend feeling of just flicking through bits. So I wanted to make a book that was like that had sort of snapshots of stories of my life. And I wanted to be honest. So I definitely wanted to not just portray like, it's hilarious interviewing pop stars and parties are fun. Like I wanted to talk about growing up and how important my family were and how they shaped me. And I guess it's like all different stories. I guess the common thread's like transitions. It's sort of me figuring out who I was and figuring out my sexuality, and then the transition from going from like suburbia to the city, from the north to the south. But I didn't want it to be all everything's perfect. No.
Tell us a little bit about your family, because it's intriguing. You're much younger than your siblings, aren't you?
Yeah. So I technically I'm not an only child, because I have older brother and older sister, but they're 11 and 13 years older than me. So I sort of grew up feeling like an only child, because when I was like 4, they were like 15 and 17 or 15 and 18. So they were like, they're not like, they're such adults to you when you're 5. So I never like played with them. So I did grow up feeling like an only child, but I never felt lonely or anything. They always included me, and I was expected to always be able to talk to adults and hang out with their friends or hang out with mum and dad's friends. But there's a lot about my family and how they shaped me. And I'd never really thought about that until I had to sit and write about it. Like I never like sat down and be like, wow, my family really shaped me. But when I was forced to do it on a computer, I was like, all those little things that have made me do what I want to do in my life and love talking to people and love having parties and hosting and having people round and bringing people together, that all stemmed from, my mum and dad and brother and sister.
Because of the age gap, you did go on holidays with your mum and dad, didn't you?
Yeah.
Just the three of you?
Yeah, just the three of us. And they got to 41 and 43 and, you know, they were proper working class and had worked really hard, had the 2 kids and had like moved into a nice suburban area, got a house, done all the hard like rubbish bit with kids, and now they were like 11 and 13 and they were like, oh my God, like now we're in our 40s. I always imagine they could be a bit like Max and Susanna in Brookside, like got to like their 40s and like maybe have a cocktail in the week, like the kids are grown. And then my mum just the one, do you know what I mean, like finish work and like kick off the shoes and be like, let's have a Negroni. And then my mum found out she was pregnant at 41, and I think they were like, oh my God, like they said this to me, it was not planned, and then I had to be expected, because I don't think they were up for like being like, right, let's do play groups and play dates. They were like, no, we've done that, so if you want to hang out with us, you're coming to dinner parties. So I was always expected to go to like, you know, girls' night, which was my mum's like monthly get together of all the girls, or go on family holidays, like my mum and my dad, and they'd be like, we're going to a restaurant at 9:00, deal with it.
So that would shape you in an extraordinary way, because you were just privy to so much adult life that you wouldn't ordinarily have been privy to.
Yeah, and like the music and stuff, you know, like my dad would be like on the school run would be like Frank Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald. So I'd be like going to school singing those songs.
But it does sound like a very lovely childhood, actually, a really happy family. And your dad's job, will you just tell us about your dad's job?
Yeah.
Just the freebies.
Yeah, so my dad, he was born in 1941 and he was born, my gran raised him as like a single mum in the 40s and 50s, and I think he got a job when he was like 14 or something. He was like, that's it. So he sort of became like the man of the house super young, and he was a proper grafter and really, really worked hard and always had a job and was obsessed with, you know, having a work ethic and us having a work ethic. And he worked in sales for like frozen food for like Nestle, and they looked after like fab 80s and 90s brands like Lean Cuisine and like Findus crispy pancakes. And
please, it's the French bread pizza.
French bread pizza, which I thought was like, I thought it was like so chic that we were having like a pizza.
I bet you didn't have that at home, did you? We did have it.
Well, we did. We had quite a lot of Findus. Was the advertising legend Success on a Plate for you? Was that Findus?
Was that Findus?
I think that was
Success on a Plate.
I don't remember, but we used to, we basically grew up on exclusively frozen Findus food. And my brother had more of it because my brother was born in the 70s and he thinks the reason he's bald is because he exclusively ate frozen food. And he's like really angry at my mum and dad. But yeah, my dad used to get all like knockoff like Findus stuff. So I write all in the book about all the stuff that we used to have like for our tea. We'd have like, you know, like a faulty Kit Kat. Or maybe,
faulty Kit Kat.
Yeah, you know, and it's not got the wafer in.
Oh yeah, the solid chocolate.
Or a solid
that was
one.
Always a rumour.
Yeah.
Those, but they existed.
Yeah, they did exist. Yeah, loads of them in the 80s.
How would you have been able to tell in the factory that it was a faulty Kit Kat?
I don't know how they did. Maybe weight. Yeah, maybe weight. Yeah.
Sorry, I sound as though I had
insight. But Jane worked that.
There's a lot about Jane we don't know. There's some mystery
The Findus years.
Do you know what? She is the ultimate crispy pancake as well. A little bit difficult.
They're
on the
so
outside.
disgusting. And my mum and dad used to be like, they are delicious. But my dad worked there and he was always like even at home would like sell us the food. We were like, we're eating it. And my dad would be like, do you know a Kit Kat sold every 6 seconds? I'm like, wait, I'm not buying them.
So into this lovely, warm, close family is little Nick, who's realising that maybe he doesn't have the same reaction to the calendars that other parents are buying their young boys every Christmas.
Yeah.
Talk us through that element of realising something about yourself.
Yeah, so I remember it mid 90s, probably when I was like 11. So like 1995 was like everything felt very laddie, and the culture was very like alpha laddie, and I didn't feel like a lad, and it felt like there was all these like an array of magazines like Nuts and Zoo and FHM, and everyone was obsessed at school, even when we were like 11 in first year secondary school, of what calendar are you going to get? What are you going to have a calendar? And the calendar was like someone off the telly in lingerie. So you might get like a Jet from Gladiators, or like a Gail Porter or Melinda Messenger. Cliff Richard. And I like could never... I always used to have to be like, oh my God, I've got to get a calendar of a lady. And I just had no sexual desire whatsoever, so I'd sort of pick a lady that I thought would disguise the fact that he didn't
Just
fancy
explain
ladies.
Who you did pick.
So I went for Kylie,
Right?
Because I thought she's heterosexual, she's very for the straights, and I didn't realise that Kylie was actually really camp. And anyone that I loved, I didn't realise was camp. Like I loved Tina Turner, and I thought Tina Turner was like a good cover for a gay, and also Jerry Halliwell and Kylie. It's like the gayest people ever. Or it's like Madonna, she's quite good.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Actually, Madonna played quite an interesting part, though, didn't she?
She did.
In coming out for you. There are a couple of passages, Nick, in the book where you talk about is essentially your terrible guilt that your religious upbringing made you feel about who you are. And they're serious passages, aren't they? It was a serious thing for you. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we grew up like Roman Catholic, and I went to 2 Roman Catholic schools, and we do like, church every weekend as a family. And it felt there was a lot of religious life in the school, and a lot of, I don't know, like, not that they were forcing heterosexuality down your neck, but there was no mention of any gay life anywhere at school or sort of on the telly or anywhere, like in, that I was experiencing. We didn't see happy gay life represented, or just everything felt quite like a tragic tale or a devastating story of someone's like killed themselves because they were gay, or maybe it's a horrible secret that someone was gay.
But your family were not homophobic.
No, my family weren't at all. No, not from my family. I mean more from like the telly and like I don't know, I could just like feel it. And then I'd never seen like gays just having a bit of a laugh or a bit of fun or living a normal life.
Except there was the couple. There was the couple,
yeah. There was a couple near us. But I didn't really... They were so ancient to me when I was a teenager. I think they were in like their 70s or 80s then. But I remember watching a snippet of In Bed with Madonna and seeing Madonna be with gay men and being like, wow, she's like the most famous person in the world and she loves these gay people. So I remember seeing that, and it was the first time that I saw gay men having a nice time or just being human, just being represented, really. And that was like one of the breakthrough moments of me being like, oh, Madonna likes them.
It's hard. Sorry, please.
I was just going to say, how much of a difference do you think it would have made to you if the Radio 1 breakfast show in your teenage life had been presented by a fabulous, happy, sorted gay man?
It would have made a massive difference. It would have made a huge difference, because the only, like I said, my family definitely weren't homophobic, and my brother used to love going to like Canal Street and the gay village in Manchester because he loved going to the clubs there with his girlfriend, and they loved house music. And my dad, loved Elton and raved about Boy George. So I don't know, there was like bits of gay life, but they always felt like like Boy George and Elton John were like aliens. They didn't feel like they could exist in normal life. So I think hearing someone talk about anything, and they happened to be gay, would have made a big difference, I think, growing up.
You did go, and I think it's very sweet of you, to the football with your dad.
Yes.
Despite not having... Well, there were elements of it you enjoyed. The journey there, the journey back.
Yeah.
Flicking through a magazine, which may or may not have featured David Beckham.
Yes.
I think he was... I think I can remember the image that also played a major part in your awakening, where he's in... Perhaps it played a part in my awakening. Where he's sitting in a bath.
Yeah.
And he's just... Pulling his hair.
Yeah, because it was such a big thing in our house, football, and I still love the sound of it. Like, I still love having it on, and if football's on the weekend, I love, if I'm having a roast, having the sound of, like, I don't know, whoever's playing United and Tottenham Hotspur. I love the sound of football being on, and I love the feel of it, and I love that people love it. So I'm happy for people to love it,
yes,
but I personally find it really boring. And there's just something really nostalgic about it. It was such a big thing in our house. So I used to go with my dad and my brother would go and sit in the Stretford end, which my dad would say was for yobs and not proper football fans. So we'd sit with the proper football fans who, even if United won, my dad would be like, they didn't deserve it. You know, he was like, I like sports.
Old school, hardcore.
Yeah. Whereas my brother was like, let's have a fight. So I'd go and I'd really try. And every time I'd go, I'd be like, maybe I'll like it this week. I'm going to really concentrate. But I don't think anything should be 90 minutes. It's too long.
How long was your breakfast show?
It's so long, I'd get bored halfway through. And then I wrote about in the book me trying to get into football, and I used to love magazines, and I still love magazines. And one week I was like, let me get a football magazine, and I'll flick through it, and I'll figure it out, because it was all anyone talked about at school. And I flicked through and I saw this image that really struck me, and I'd never seen anything like it. And I was young, so I didn't realise it was a sexual awakening. I was so young that I just was mystified by it. It was like looking at a nice sunset or something, or wow, look at that horse, or wow, look at its mane. And it was a picture of David Beckham in a bath, and it was black and white, and it was just him after he'd played football. And I remember taking it to my mum and being like, wow, look at this. How amazing is this? It's beautiful. And my mum being like, yeah, it is. And I was like, please, can I put it on my wall? Because my dad was very particular about what we had on our walls. And dads were mad for sellotape on wallpaper.
Terrible. Can't go down.
Yeah, big sin. So my mum was like, go and ask your dad. And I went out and found him, and he was doing a conifer, like dads do. Or doing a conifer of a weekend up a ladder with a hedge trimmer.
Man work.
And I was like,
that was a euphemism there. I
wasn't sure. But...
doing a conifer. And I was like, please, can I put this up? And his only concern was not using sellotape. He was like, yeah, but use blue tack. Brilliant. And I remember getting it and pulling it out and putting it on my wall. And that was a massive moment of realization where I was like, oh, I do like something football-y. But the reason I like it is because it's David Beckham, and David Beckham's face was man, it was the perfect representation of a man. Then I was like, oh, maybe I fancy men.
Well, and it turned out you did.
I did, yeah.
Have you met him? Because you've met almost everybody else.
I have met him, yeah.
And did you tell him?
I think I did tell him. I met him through a friend who is a sports agent, and he knew my cousin. He was a bit of a family friend, and he introduced me to him. And I think I did tell him. I can't really remember. It was in a Chinese restaurant by pure chance. But I've interviewed him a few times, and I've seen him around. I saw him at Glastonbury most recently, but he kind of, no disrespect to him, I just don't want to talk to him, if I'm honest, because it's too weird. It's I just someone that you idolize. I'm not into. So what's going on? I can't. It's the one person that I can't.
But your gift for celebrity friendship is off the scale, Nick. You know everybody, and everybody knew you, and you were around people's houses. It felt to me, reading the book, which it's really good fun, but you go from Oldham to hanging out with Kate Moss more or less without effort. But it can't have been as simple as that.
Well, it was a mad time, really. When I first went to London, my family were, we didn't know anyone that had gone to London, or anyone that had worked in media or a creative industry, and they thought I was mad, and I didn't really know what the job was. My mum and dad didn't know what MTV was, and I was there to be an intern in the international creative department, and they were like, what's that? And I was like, I actually don't know. So I went to London on a whim, because I really was precise about wanting to host the Radio on Breakfast show, and I just knew I needed to get to London as my first step. So when I got there, I was working at MTV. I didn't know anyone in London. I knew two people who were living in London, but they were in Mexico, and they let me live in their flat. And the deal was you can live in our flat for free if you flyer for our club and you do the door at our club. So I'd work at MTV like Monday to Friday, and then on a Friday night I'd like go flyer in and I'd do the door at their club and stuff, and then like go into the club and make sure people got in. And I don't know, it was just a funny time. I don't know if it's because I don't know what was in the air, but one by one everyone sort of had like a mission. I don't know if it's because I attracted outsiders because I was one, or maybe because I was on my own, I attracted other people who were on their own with a little mission. But everyone sort of ended up having a dream, and not in a annoying way of like, let's hang out and fulfill our dreams. Like, no one talked about careers. You know, like one by one of my friends became like a model, or my friend became like a fashion designer. And then we'd met Amy Winehouse from just bumbling around Camden, like before she'd brought out Rehab. You know, she wasn't like the famous Amy Winehouse. And then all of a sudden she got really famous. And then all of a sudden I met this guy Jack, and his backing singer was Adele, and now Adele's Adele. So it sort of all mad happened really honestly by accident. And it was a bit like the pub that we'd all go to. It was a bit like in Cheers. Like, you could go at any time and the same people would be there, and there'd be all sorts of people there. And because I didn't know anyone, that was like my meeting point. Like, that was the only place that I knew to go, and I'd know that I'd meet people and bump into people.
Yeah. I mean, lots of people speak about that kind of time in London, that creative, I don't know what it was. I mean, if you're struggling to find the words for it, I certainly would be.
Yeah.
But did you have a sense at that time that your life was, I don't know, you were part of something that was really defining a whole creative thing in the country? Did you feel that?
No,
Did you feel anything bigger
not
than
at
where
all.
you were?
Not at all. I didn't feel that at all. And it's funny now, I'm doing a book event with Makita Oliver, who I used to do Channel 4 with, T4 with. And it's funny now, like, if we're out, people will be like, oh my God, like young people, they're like, I used to watch you guys on T4 and like read about you. And me and Makita like never really thought that people ever watched it. And I think because we didn't have an Instagram, we didn't overthink, you know, like, who are we? What are we doing? We were like, we'll just go to T4, do that, and then we'll go to the pub. And I don't know if it was the lack of social media that made us less conscious about what we looked like or what we were doing or documenting stuff. We just sort of got on with it.
Your mum and dad came along for the ride as well, which is one of the bits in the book that I enjoyed the most, where they would actually accompany you to showbiz events. On one occasion, Lady Gaga asked your dad for a bit of advice about her breasts.
Yes, she did. Yeah, I always like mixing people together and including all sorts of people, and I've liked that since I was a kid. And so anytime I'd get invited to some at Fab, I'd be like, oh my God, my mum would love this, or my dad would love this, so they should come. And when they come down to visit me in London, when I started doing telly, they still didn't get it because they didn't have Sky. They had like 4 channels, or maybe they had Channel 5, maybe they had 5 channels, but they didn't know what E4 was or no. MTV at all. So when they'd come down to London, I'd say like, come with me to E4 and come and see what we're doing. And they'd be like, oh, we don't want to go to that. We don't want to. And one day I dragged them in, and I was interviewing Lady Gaga, and she just released Just Dance. And it was when she was just, the fame was like simmering, and she was about to become, you know, the huge mega pop star she is. And we went to this like quite rubbish little TV studio in West London. And when we got there was just like one dressing room. And because I was with my mum and dad, Gaga was like, oh my God, get mum and dad in here, bring them in. She's like, I don't need the dressing room. She's like, I don't even wear any clothes, so come in. And she went to do a performance with gaffer tape on her nipples. And she found, like, you know, the hilarity in the situation of like 2 OAPs from Oldham and her like direct from some club in New York with gaffer tape on her nipples. And she was really like, Daddy, called him Daddy.
Yeah, it's a bit creepy, that.
Really creepy. Daddy, are my nipples covered? And he was like, yeah, you're all right, love. But you know what? For the rest of the time, he was like, she did the performance, and obviously it was amazing. And he was like, yeah, fair play. It was all right, that. That's what he was like, yeah, it's all right. But for the rest of the time, he'd refer to her as me mate Gaga. So he'd call and be like, hey, me mate Gaga's on Jonathan Ross tonight. And he loved it. And to be fair to her, every time I've seen her since, over the past, I don't know, how long ago was that? 14, 15 years, she always is like, how's your mum? How's your dad? She remembered it.
I tell you what, it's a lesson in where your kids' lives can take your own, isn't it? Because that's a long way from a faulty Kit Kat.
It is.
Can we move on to the Radio 1 breakfast show?
Yes.
I mean, it's extraordinary, Nick, that you were managing to do a very demanding job whilst you had this extraordinary social life. I mean, getting up at what, 3:30 in the morning?
No, he never got up that early.
never got there early. Like 5.
5, okay.
Five's fine.
Even 5. I mean, there must have been quite a few mornings where, I mean, how shall I put this? You might have still been over the limit. You might have still been intoxicated.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think after the Brits, this was my rule with going out and going to the radio. I thought it was fine to go on air with a hangover or still a bit, woozy, if it was an event that the country had been part of. So like the Brit Awards. I don't think I could do it and be like, I've been round my friend Fee's and got drunk. It's like not the same. So I think if I'd been to an award show that was on the telly, or there was, I don't know, Wimbledon was on, and then we talked on the radio like, we're going to a party after Wimbledon with something. I think it was fine because it sort of carried on the narrative for everyone to be part of. So definitely after the Brits, we would, not on purpose, every year I'd say, I'm not doing it this year. And I think we did it about 3 times in 6 years. So 50-50. Where we'd not gone to sleep and gone straight through. And it is quite fun till about 8 a.m.
Yeah.
And then everyone starts getting really tired and you've got to still be on the radio. So all the people that came in who were like, that's so funny, yeah, are like, yeah, I don't like it now. Like there's people arriving in the office.
And they
it's
smell.
weird.
You smell?
Yeah, and it's smelly and they don't like it. But I will say, my 2 producers thought they were being really smart one year, Matt and Fee, and they were like, we are going to go to, it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, or maybe a bit earlier, maybe it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And they went, we're going to leave now and we're going to go to Radio 1 and we're going to go asleep and we're going to wake up at 6 and start the show. And I was like, okay, I'm going to stay. So I stayed out, I get in, I go to start the show at 6, no Matt, no Fee. They had decided to sleep on, unbeknown to me, sleep on different floors of the BBC. So they weren't there and then just slept through their alarms and woke up at like 7:45. So I was on air hosting the radio show with like drunk friends and the former producer from the show before who had to look after this car crash of a show. It was her first shift as a producer. So she had to take over and then they sort of came round on like the 3rd floor at 8 a.m. and were like, oh my God. So it did happen once or twice.
Do you still listen to Radio 1?
I don't. Occasionally, I will pop it on, but I didn't really listen when I was there because it reminded me of work and I know how it works. So when I do listen, I'm like, oh, Greg's going to do a trail in a second, play 2 songs on the news. So it's sort of, when you like do something, it sort of takes the joy out of it a little bit.
So tiny bit, I do.
Do you know what I mean? And you're like, oh, news is coming. Oh, I know it's going to do. So you don't listen. I listen in the car, but when I'm at home and you're trying to do something, I can't listen. Not out of not wanting to, but out of like your brains, you think you're at work. Yes. So you're like trying to be like...
So it's not because you're an old codger who...
No, I'm still very young and relevant.
Oh, no.
I tell you what, Jane, I think he's ripe for turning into Times Radio, don't you?
Right?
It won't be long.
Yeah. I know, right. I mean, yes.
Come with us.
A little
come on.
fresh face, though, at the moment, I think.